A tea company sells blended tea for $33 per pound. To make blackberry tea, dried blackberries that cost $18.50 per pound are blended with black tea that costs $43 per pound. How many pounds of black tea should be added to 5 pounds of dried blackberries to make blackberry tea? So this is called a mixture problem, and the reason it's called a mixture problem is because we are mixing two things together. In this case, we're mixing dried blackberries that cost $18.50 per pound with black tea that costs $43 per pound. And the result is blackberry tea that sells for $33 per pound. Now, the question the problem is asking us is how many pounds of black tea should we add to 5 pounds of dried blackberries? There's a lot of information in this problem, and there's a few ways that you can organize it, but the way I like best is to create a table. And so our table is going to need to have 3 rows. We're going to need to have one row dedicated to our dried blackberries. We're going to need to have another row dedicated to our black tea. And then our third row is going to be dedicated to the mixture, which is the blackberry tea. Blackberry tea. There we go. So we're going to have 3 rows. This is probably a much bigger table than I need, but that's all right. Okay, so let's talk about our columns. And we're going to need 3 columns as well. Our first column is going to be the units that we're measuring in. Everything in this problem is being measured in pounds. So that's going to be pounds for our first column. The other piece of information that we're given is the cost per pound. So the cost per pound. And then the last column that we're going to have is going to be the total cost. Okay, and let's start filling this in, and we'll start with the dried blackberries. So it says in the problem that the dried blackberries cost $18.50 per pound. So that's the cost per pound is $18.50. And the problem tells us that we're going to be using 5 pounds of them. So the total cost then for blackberries is going to be 5 multiplied by 18.50. If it's 18.50 per pound and I've got 5 pounds, it's 5 times 18.50. Okay, now let's look at the black tea. The black tea, I don't know how many pounds because that's the question. How many pounds of black tea? So that's where I'm going to put the variable. Let's do tea, just because. But I do know from the problem that the cost is $43 per pound. So that's going to be 43t for my total cost. And then for blackberry tea, I also don't know how many pounds of blackberry tea I'm going to have, but I know it's going to be however much I get when I add the blackberries and the tea together. So the amount of blackberry tea I'm going to have is going to be the total of that mixture. So 5 plus tea. And the problem tells me that the cost per pound is $33. It sells for $33 a pound. And that means the total cost of this one is going to be $33 times whatever the number of pounds is. And so once we have this set up, we're ready to write our equation. Our equation is going to be that the cost of the dried blackberries plus the cost of the black tea should equal the cost of the blackberry tea. And now we're just going to solve this equation for t. And so the first thing that we do is some multiplication. So 5 times $18.50, or 5 times 18.5, is 92.5. There's nothing to do yet with the 43t, so we'll leave that as is. And then here we've got some distributive property to do. We'll do 33 multiplied by 5 first, that is 165. And 33 multiplied by t is 33t, with a plus sign in between. Okay, so now we've got variables on both sides of the equation. We have a 43t on the left and a 43t on the right. Oops, I forgot to show my work. Distributive property. Let's go ahead and use the subtraction property of equality here to get our t's on the same side. I think the easiest way to do that is to subtract the smaller value of t, which is 33t. That way we'll avoid negatives. And bonus, that means we're going to end up with the t over on the left side, which is handy. Of course, the 33t minus 33t is going to be 0. So that's gone. And that was the subtraction property of equality. Now we have just one term with t in it. So let's worry about isolating that t. I think the subtraction property of equality is a good thing to do next. There we go. And then we have 165 minus 92.5, and that's going to be 72.5. Again, the subtraction property of equality. And we are now just one step away from the answer, which is to divide by 10. Dividing by 10 is oh so easy. You just move the decimal over a little bit. So t equals 7.25. This is the division property of equality. Make sure to show our work. Division property of equality. So 7.25 is our numerical answer, but we want to write our answer in context. We will need 7.25 pounds of black tea. There we go. So this is a mixture problem. There are a few ways that you can do this type of problem, but in my opinion, the easiest way to do it is to set up a table. And then after you have the table set up, what we did was we found the totals and we took the total of the first row plus the total of the second row equals the total of the third row. And that was the equation that we solved.